Okay, Chapter 7, the compensation management, will tell us something about the definition of competitiveness. So, defining competitiveness. So, there. So, this chapter will actually concentrate on the key concepts, on the key issues, and the theories related to external competitiveness. And the second, the pay policy in the pay model. Okay, so external competitiveness will focus on the pay comparison outside the organization, and it will refer to the pay relationship amongst organization and that organization's pay relative to its competitors. Now, the external competitiveness will involve making decisions in two key areas. No, so there. These are the pay level and the pay mixed. Okay, so it is important. No, so there. And then to achieve the objectives stipulated for each pay system, so an organization must properly position both the pay level and the pay mix relative to the competitors or the industry practice. Now, what are the key factors that influences uh, the external competitiveness? These are going to be identified and discussed. Now, this factor would actually include competitions in the labor market for people with various skills. Another one is the competition in the product and service markets. So later we're going to be defining both concepts. Now, these two will affect the financial condition of the organization. And and the characteristics unique to each organization and employees will be part of the business strategy, will be part of the technology offerings, and then the productivity and experience of each workforce. Okay, next, the various competitive pay policy options that an organization can choose are going to be explained also. And these alternatives will include the pay above market. Again, pay above market. That is leading the industry. Lead. And then pay with market. Now, so when you say pay with market, it matches. Match. And then pay below market, which is lagging or lag. So again, these alternatives will include pay above market. We call it lead. Pay with market, we call it match, and pay below market, we call it lag. Now, flexible policies and employer of choice will be provided here for them to make a better position for or decision for engaging these alternatives. And then this chapter will also include examining the consequences in an employer's choice of pay policy on the objective of the pay model that is based on efficiency, based on fairness, and based on compliance. Okay. Now, so what are the learning objectives of the chapter that we're going to be discussing? So, students will be able to discuss or explain the importance of external competitiveness to the pay model. And then it will also give us insights on the discussion and knowledge about the factors that will influence external competitiveness. And then another learning objective is that for us to be able to discuss the differences among labor market, among product market, and the organizational factors in determining the external competitiveness. Another one is that to explain the different pay policy positions and the consequences of using each. Now, also explain the consequences of the pay policy on the objectives of the pay model. Okay, so there. Now, what is a compensation strategy based on the external competitiveness? So, what does it means? So, external competitiveness is part of the second pay policy, and that focuses on the comparison between or outside the organization, comparisons with the other employers that have employees with the same skills. Okay, so that is external competitiveness. Now, as a major strategic decision is whether to mirror what competitors are paying or to design a package that may differ from competitors but better fits with the business strategy. Okay. Now, uh, an organization's policy on external competitiveness is its pay in relation to that of the other organization. Now, the external competitiveness is expressed in practice by setting a pay level that is above, or that is below, or that is equal to that of the competitors. And the external competitiveness is also expressed by determining the mix of pay forms that is relative to those of the competitors. Now, we try to define now what is external competitiveness. So simply refers to the pay relationship amongst organizations. So the organizations pay relative to its competitors. So that is external competitiveness. Now what about pay levels? Pay level is referring to the average of the array of rates paid by an employer. For example, the base pay plus bonuses pay plus the benefits plus value of stocks holdings over the number of employees. So that is the pay level. Now, what is the pay form? A pay form are the various types of payments or pay mix that make up total compensation. Now, both pay level and pay mix decisions are focusing on two objectives. So what are these? The control cost and increase revenues. And then the other one is attract and retain employees. So these are they focus on those two objectives. Now, control cost and increase revenues, what does it mean? Pay level decisions have a significant impact on expenses, definitely. Now, other things being equal, the higher the pay level, the higher the labor costs. So therefore, the labor cost is equal to the pay level times the number of employees. Now, the higher the pay level relative to what the competitors pay, the greater the relative cost to provide similar product or services. Thus, it might appear that all organizations would pay the same job of the same rate. But, in the industry practice, it doesn't happen that way. Another one is paying employees above the market standard can be an effective strategy even on depending on what the organizations gets in return. So they expect something in return. Definitely the return of investment by spending too much and the increase of salary of the employees. So that is inevitable and expected. Now, how to attract and retain the right employees? Okay, so these are the factors. Different employers set different pay levels, definitely, for it to be able to have a differentiation. And based on the objectives and policies and the goals of the organization or the business. Now, different employers set different pay levels. Now, they choose to pay above or below what others are paying for the same work. So that is what happens. And then one company may pay its employees more because they believe they are more productive than those of the other companies. So that is one basis. And then another company may pay less because it tries to differentiate itself on the non-financial, but more on the relational returns. Therefore, there is no single going rate, no standards in the labor market for any specific job. Not only do rates paid for similar jobs, but they vary amongst the employers, but a single company actually may set a different pay level for different job families. So that is the differences between and the factors that would consider in attracting and retaining the right employees for a particular industry. Now, what shapes the external competitiveness? Okay, so several factors would give us that would affect a company's decision on the pay level and pay mix. So what are those? These factors will include the following. competition in the labor market for people with various skills. And then competition in the product and service markets with which affects the financial condition of the organization. And then another one is the characteristic that is unique to each organization and to each employees. It's part of the business strategy, it's part of the technology, and the productivity and the experience of the workforce. Now, what are labor markets? Labor market factors. So the economists actually will describe these two basic types of market. So the quoted price and the bourse wage or price. So what are these? When you say quoted price market, it is an example of an advertisement that includes a job opening's starting wage. So it is being declared, in the advertisement, in the classified ad, that it includes the starting wage, starting from that, and then afterwards, the bourse. Bourse spells as B-O-U-R-S-E. This market allows haggling over the terms and conditions related to a job opening until an agreement is reached. So there's a concession between the potential employee and the employer. Okay, so when both agrees with the conditions, so there is an agreement. Okay, now in both of the above markets, employers are the buyers and the potential employees are the sellers. Now, if the inducement offered by an employer and the skills offered by the employee are mutually acceptable, so they will struck a deal. They will struck a deal. So there's a deal on both of them. So it has to be acceptable for both parties. Now, though the interaction of labor demand and labor supply, employees are allocated to jobs at specified pay rates. Now, how does labor market work? Okay, the labor market work based on these theories. So, theories of labor markets begin with the four underlying assumptions. So, what are these assumptions? That employers always seek to maximize profits. That people are homogeneous and therefore interchangeable. Okay, that pay rates reflect all costs associated with employment, and that markets faced by employers are competitive. Therefore, there is no advantage for a single employer to pay above or below the market rate. Okay, so that's one of what the factors of the labor market work. Now, another one is, although these assumptions oversimplify reality, so they also provide a framework for understanding labor markets. Now, in understanding how labor market works requires analysis of the demand supply of labor. So the concept of the demand and supply of labor. Now, the demand side will focus on the actions of the employer. How many new employees they seek and what they are able and willing to pay those employees. So this is the demand side of the labor. Now, the supply side looks at potential employees. Now, what will matter is that their qualification and the pay that they are willing to accept in exchange for their services. Again, so there. So the market rate is where the lines for labor demand and labor supply process. Okay, so that's market rate. Now, what about labor demand? So labor demand is an analysis of the demand for labor enables an employer to determine how many employees it will hire at the market rate of pay. Okay, so in the short term, an employer cannot change any factor of production other than labor. Therefore, its level of production can change only if it changes the level of human resources. And under such conditions, a single employer's demand for labor coincides with the marginal product of labor. So that is labor demand. Now, what is the definition of marginal product of labor? So when you say marginal product of labor, it is the additional output that is associated with the employment of one additional person with other production factors held constant. Remember that. Now, another definition is the marginal revenue of labor. So, when you say marginal revenue of labor, it is the additional revenue generated when the firm employs one additional persons with other production factors held constant. Okay, so that's marginal revenue of labor. Now, we're talking about labor, no? So there. Now, what is marginal product? Okay, the marginal product is a change in output that is associated with an additional unit of labor, and it must be analyzed. Now, the marginal product increases up to a certain point and then begins to decline with the hiring of additional units of labor. Remember, with other factors of production fixed. Okay. Now, the diminishing marginal productivity results from the fact that each additional unit of labor has a progressively smaller share of the other factors of production with which to work. Another one, in the short term, unless factors of production are changed, each additional unit of labor will produce less than the previous one. Okay, so that is under the marginal product. Now, what about marginal revenue? This is the money generated by the sale of the product, the additional output from the employment of one additional person. Therefore, an employer will continue to hire additional people until the marginal revenue generated by the last hire is equal to the cost associated with employing the person. It's important. Now, because other potential costs do not change in the short run. Now, the level of demand that maximizes the profit is the level at which the marginal revenue of the last hire is equal to the wage rate for that hire. So that is marginal revenue. Now, the supply and demand at the market individual employer level. So while this model provides a valuable analytical framework, it oversimplifies the real world. Neither the marginal product nor the marginal revenue is directly measurable. Okay. Now, we go on discussing labor supply. Okay, so with respect to the supply of labor, there are certain assumptions. Assumptions about the behavior of potential employees that must be considered. Now, many people are seeking jobs, and they possess accurate information about all job openings. The barriers to mobility among jobs do not even exist. These are discrimination, licensing provisions, or union membership requirements, and among others. So, these are the barriers to mobility among jobs. Okay. Just as with the analysis of labor demand, these assumptions simplify the real world. As the assumptions change to move closely reflects reality, labor supplies becomes less elastic or less responsive to changes in pay. Okay? Now, the modifications to the demand side. How does it happen? Economic models must be frequently revised to account for what's happening in the reality. A change in the perspective from all employers to a particular employer must incorporate a change in economic models to help understand what transpires and actually occurs. Okay? And then 3 modifications address why an employer would pay more than what theory states is the market determined rate. Okay, so what are these? Labor demand theories and implications. So, compensating differentials. One of the theories, Adam Smith, stated that individuals will consider the whole of the advantages and the disadvantages of different employments and make decisions based on the alternative with the greatest net advantage. Thus, if a job has negative characteristics, then an employer must offer higher wages to compensate for these negative features. Okay? Now, such compensating differentials will explain the presence of various pay rates in the market. However, the documentations that is involved in the difficulties in measuring and controlling all these factors that go into the net advantage calculations. Okay, so there. Now, you talk about efficiency wage. Now, according to this theory, high wages may increase efficiently and actually lower labor costs if they attract higher quality applicants, lower turnover, increase worker effort, reduce shrinking, reduce the need of supervised employees. Another one is that the efficiency increases by hiring better employees or motivating the present employees to work smarter or harder. Now, some of the research on the theory indicates the support for it. For example, a research results support the proposition that higher wages attract more qualified applicants. However, the higher wages also attract more unqualified applicants. So an above market wage does not actually guarantee a more productive workforce. Now, an organization's ability to pay is related to the efficiency wage model. So firms with greater profits will share their successes with employees, and usually called rent sharing or academicians. Now, rent is a return, profits, that is received from the activities that are in excess of the minimum pay level. So that is needed to attract people to those activities. Now, the issue of the pay mix has been ignored by a lot of research based on the simplifying assumptions. And assumptions that the pay level includes the value of different forms. Okay? So that is efficiency wage. Now, what is signaling? Okay, signaling as a theory stipulates that an employer deliberately designs pay level and mix as part of a strategy that signal to both potential and current employees the kinds of behavior it seeks, thereby establishing its brand. Okay? For example, an employer may combine how base pay with high bonuses in hope of attracting employees more willing to take the risk. Okay? And then a study of college students approaching graduation is found that both pay level and mix affected their job decisions in joining a particular industry that they wanted to. And then signaling works on the supply side too. On the supply side, as suppliers of labor signal to potential employers. Okay? What is the modification to the supply side? There are theories that focuses on this and understanding the employee behavior and the supply side of a model. Now, what are the supply side theories and in its implications? So we're talking about one is the reservation wage. When you say reservation wage, according to this theory, job seekers have a reservation wage level below which they will not accept a job offer, regardless of the other job attributes such as the advancement of potential or working conditions. So there. Then the other theories go a step further, stating that some job seekers, we call them the satisfiers. No? Job seekers, another term is the satisfiers, that take the first job offer they get where the pay meets their reservation wage. Now, which could be above or below the market wage. So these are the things that would be considered. Uh, the theory seeks to explain differences in workers' responses to others, or to offers rather. Now, another one is the human capital. This theory is based on the premise that the higher earnings will flow to those who improve their potential productivity by investing in themselves. So when you say investing in themselves, it's by acquiring additional education, additional training, and experience. Now, the theory will assume that people are paid at the value of their marginal product. Now, for example, jobs that require long, expensive training should receive higher pay levels than jobs that require less investment. And it's just logical. Now, a number of other factors that influence the supply of labor include the geographic barriers to mobility among jobs, to union requirements, and to lack of information about job openings, and the degree of risk involved, and the degree of unemployment. Okay, so that is human capital. Next is the product market factors and ability to pay. An employer's pay level is constrained by its ability to compete in the product or service market. And the product market conditions may, to a large extent, determine what an organization can afford to pay. Now, two key products market factors. So, the product demand and the degree of competition. So, these are the market factors, no? Product market factors. And these two can affect the ability of an organization to change to what it charges for its product and services. So, what is product demand? Although labor market conditions and legal requirements put a floor on the pay level that is required to attract employees, the product market puts a lid on the maximum pay level an employer can set. Okay? They put a cap on it, a lid on the maximum pay level. Now, the degree of competition is being discussed here also, no, and articulated. Employers in highly competitive markets, such as the manufacturers of automobiles and generic drugs, are less able to raise prices without loss of revenues. And then other degree of competition is that other factors that influence pay level include the productivity of labor, the technology employed, and the level of production relative to plant capacity available. However, these factors obviously vary across industries. Okay, depending. Now, there's a different view on what manager says. Okay, so their discussions with managers actually provide insights on how all these economic factors translate into actual pay decisions. So it's important for you to be able to assess the economic factors. Now, some research indicates the following findings: that the level of unemployment made almost no difference in wage recommendations, and the company's profitability was considered a factor for higher management in setting the overall pay budget, but not something managers considered for individual pay adjustments. In direct contradiction to efficiency wage theory, managers believe that problems attracting and keeping people were related to poor management rather than inadequate compensation. So that is a contradiction to the efficiency wage theory. Now, in recent times, companies are making pay cuts. So what are pay cuts? It's directly or by requiring employees to take day offs, furloughs without pay. Okay? Or by reducing the contributions to the, in America, it's 401k retirement plans. In our case, in the Philippines, it's about SSS, GSIS if you're government officials or something like that. So there. Now, That is how a different view on the manager's perspective on what manager says about it. Now, segmented supplies of labor and different going rates. So, how does it happen? Now, segmenting source of labor is another approach to cut labor cost. And people flow to the work. Now, economic conditions may require an employer to use the segmented labor supply. Uh, what does it mean? So, multiple sources of employees for a particular job category. From multiple locations to the multiple employment relationships. An example of this approach is a hospital, which recruits and staffs its nursing position from four uh, from four different sources. So what are these sources? The level and mix of cash and benefits, which is being paid each nurse depending on the source. And then another one, this segmented labor supply will result in nurses working the same jobs side by side on the same shift but earning different pay. Okay? So that's how people work to the work. I'm sorry, people flow to the work. Now, next is the workflows to the people. On-site, off-site, offshore. Okay, so workflows to the people, on-site, off-site, offshore. Now, economic conditions may require an employee or an employer to mix and match its employees receiving different compensation packages from different sources, now geographic locations included, to meet its work schedule. Now, several factors impact the selections of the sources. So what are these? So customer preferences, time schedules, and the nature of the work project. And then work flowing to lower wage locations. Now, presuming similar levels of output and quality is not actually new. Now, the 3 points that are worth remembering are the following. That reality is complex. That theories are abstract. So the theories mentioned here simply abstract away the details, clarifying the underlying factors that help us understand how reality works. The segmented sources of labor means that determining pay levels and the mix increasingly requires understanding market conditions in different, even worldwide locations. Now, managers also need to know the jobs required to do the work. Now, the task to be performed and the knowledge and the behaviors required to perform them. So, they can bundle the various tasks to send to different locations. We also consider the organization factors. So, what are these? No, industry and technology is one. So, the industry in which the organization competes influences the technologies. And these technologies that are used and the pay associated with these technologies even. So, these are part of the considerations. Now, labor-intensive industries, for example, education and healthcare. So they tend to pay less than technology-intensive industries, pharmaceuticals, no? And then whereas professional services like consulting firms tend to pay high. Okay? And then the introduction of the new technology within the industry also influences pay levels. And there are qualifications and experience that is tailored to particular technologies and are important in the analysis of the labor market. For example, a machinist. Now, machinists who build the GE diesel locomotives have different qualifications from the machinist who builds the Boeing airplanes. From the airplanes to motor vehicles, no, locomotives. So there's a big difference on the pay package on them. We also consider the employer size. Okay, the size of an organization actually affects the pay level and the mix decisions. Um, The large organizations tend to pay higher wages compared to the smaller ones. So it's a logic, no, between there's a logic between them. Now, the relationship between the organization size, ability to pay, and the pay level is consistent with economic theory. So that is talented individuals have a higher marginal value in a larger company because they can influence more people and decisions, leading to more profits in terms of productivity you're referring to here. Now, people's preferences is another one. When you say people's preferences, it's a preference for different forms of pay vary for employees. How? A better understanding of employee preferences of pay forms is important in determining the external competitiveness. How? So, by determining what pay forms, health insurance, vision care, bonuses, pensions, uh, do that's how we determine it. No, a better understanding on what pay forms that the employees value. Okay. So another one is that what forms should be changed or instituted to improve their value to employees. And another one is that markets involve both employers and employees' choices for different job pay forms. But there are substantial difficulties in reliably measuring preferences. And researchers find that people place more importance on pay than they are willing to admit. Organization strategy. Pay forms should fit an organization strategy. Pay levels that lead competitions are used in jobs that most directly impact the success of the organization. Now, in jobs with less impact, pay levels reflect a meet compensation policy. Meet compensation policy. How does it go? Some employers adopt a low wage, no service strategy. They compete by producing goods and services with the lowest total compensation possible. And other employers select a low wage, high services strategy. Another approach used by employers is a high wage, high service approach. Okay? So that is organization strategy. Now, the relevant markets are going to be discussed also. So, defining relevant market is a significant factor to the organization in determining how much pay and what mix of pay forms to offer. Now, while a single homogeneous market may be a useful analytical device, each organization operates in many labor markets determined, and each with unique demand supply even is being also recognized. Now, this definitely results into the definition that is relevant in markets for pay purposes and establishing the appropriateness competitive the appropriate rather competitive positions that is becoming imperative. Okay. And there are three factors actually that are used to determine the relevant labor market. So what are these? So number one factor in the determination of a relevant labor market is that occupation. In the occupation, you acknowledge the skill, the knowledge required. And then in geography, the willingness to relocate, to commute, or to become virtual employees. So these are the choices. Competitors is one of the three factors. Other employers in the same product or service, and the labor markets. So there. So again, the three factors that are used to determine the relevant labor markets are occupation, geography, and competitors. Now, what is a relevant market as a definition? So there are minimal research that has been conducted on how employers choose the relevant market. So research indicates managers look for at both competitors, their products, their location, and the size and the jobs, and the skills and the knowledge required, and their importance to the organization's success in determining, setting up the goals and objectives. Now, so what are these organizational success considered? So depending on its location and the size, a company may be deemed irrelevant a comparison even if it is not a product market or competitor. Now, there are data now from product market competitors that are likely to receive more weight when the employee skills are specified to the product market, when the labor costs are a large share of the total cost, when a product demand is responsive, meaning elastic to price changes, and when the supply of labor is not responsive, the supply of labor is not responsive, elastic to change in pay. Okay, so that is the data from the product market competitors that are likely to receive more weight. Now we go to the globalization of relevant labor market. So you're talking about offshoring and outsourcing. The practice of shifting work to lower wage countries is predominantly in many sectors. Now companies mainly use offshoring to reduce cost. And then, however, there are other factors to consider in deciding where jobs will be. Now, what are these? So, productivity is one. Labor cost savings should not be neutralized by lower productivity. And then, systems to monitor workers' productivity and coordination of efforts. Cost of monitoring and coordination will be high between countries which have geographic or cultural distance. Okay. Another one is the customer's reaction. Communicating with non-native English speakers is proving difficult for customers, especially in customer service industry. Now, limited pool of labor is another one. Now, as many companies tap into the limited pool of labor, labor costs would not prove to be a competitive advantage after some time. So, what are the competitive pay policy alternatives? So, our compensation theories provide some help in understanding variations in pay levels among employers, but are less helpful in understanding differences in the mix of pay forms. Now, traditional pay level policies include to lead, to meet, or to follow competition. Now, contemporary policies emphasizes flexibility amongst different employee groups, amongst pay forms of individual employees, and amongst elements of the employee relationship that the company wishes to emphasize in the external competitiveness policy. Okay? Now, the traditional level policies include to lead, to meet, or to follow competition. So, contemporary policies emphasize flexibility among different employee groups, among pay forms of individual employees, and among elements of employee relationship that the company wishes to emphasize in an external competitiveness policy. Now, what difference does the pay level policy make? So, the pay level policy is an employer is significant because the competitiveness of pay will affect an employer's ability to achieve its compensation objectives. Now, in turn, it will affect the organization's performance or success. Also, pay level research mainly focuses on base pay, which apparently will represents only a portion of compensation. So comparisons based on the base alone can mislead. No? And then the probable effects of alternative pay level and the pay level policies are will be indicated later on as we go further. Pay with competition or match. Okay, so the most common policy is to match the pay rates paid by the competitors. And this policy has the advantages since paying less than competitors may lead to employee dissatisfaction and make it more difficult to attract employees. While this policy tries to ensure an organization's wage costs are approximately equal to those of its product, the product competitors, and increases its chances of attracting applicants that is equal to its competitors. It may not provide an employer with a competitive advantage in its labor markets, however. Okay? Now, next is the lead pay or lead level policy. Lead pay level policy. A lead pay level policy is paying slightly higher rates than competitors, and it maximizes an employer's ability to attract and retain the high quality employees, and that minimizes employee dissatisfaction with that kind of pay package. Now, there are several potential advantages of these policies, and these are articulated in the following. It may offset less attractive features of a certain types of work. That is the net advantage. And it may ease of attracting prospective employees. It will also reduce vacancy rates and training time. And it will have actually led to a better quality employees and reduce turnover consequently and absenteeism. So these are the potential advantages of this lead pay level policy. Now, studies show that the use of variable pay is related to an organization's improved financial performance, but that pay level is not. And the potential negative effects of this policy will include the wages of current employees that may have to be increased to avoid internal misalignment and dissatisfaction. It may mask negative job attributes also, and that will contribute to high turnover at a later date, at a later time. And then next is the lag pay level policy. A lag pay level policy is paying below market rates. And this will hinder an organization's ability to attract employees and may lower labor costs on the consequence. But it may also foster teamwork and employee commitment, and thus increasing productivity. Okay? The lag pay level policy may be used in a combination with other features. So what are those? Such as stock ownership or better benefits, hot assignments, desirable work locations, outstanding colleagues, or strong emphasis on work-life balances. So that's how you measure it. And then a word of caution, no, actually, unmet expectations probably have also will resort to a negative effects. And it is possible to lag behind competitors in terms of pay, but led on other form of pay package, from work. Okay. Now, the different policies for different employee groups. So what? Okay. So what are these? No. So in practice, many employers are increasingly going beyond a single choice among the three policies option indicated above. And then employers may vary the policy for different occupational families or for different form of pay. They may also adopt different policies for different business unit that is facing very different competitive competitions or conditions rather. So not by pay level alone, meaning pay mix strategies. So it's not by pay level alone, no? So there. A pay mix policy alternative will include the following: performance driven, market match, work-life balance, and security. So some managers are positioning their organization's pay pay policies against competitors, no, by focusing on total returns from work, and that goes beyond the financial returns, and offering people choices amongst these returns. Okay. Now, we discussed about the pay mix policy alternatives. So, employer of choice or shared choice is number one. So, in this context, under employee choice, an employer's pay policy is viewed as one of its overall position on external competitiveness. The employer competes based on its overall reputation as a place to work. Okay? And along with pay, other human resource activities are going to be emphasized, including challenging work, advancement, training, and job security. For example, IBM compares with the information technology markets by offering strongly differentiate based on business and individual results. And they offer extensive training opportunities even and challenging work assignments, for its employees, and leads the market with a strong emphasis on performance. Now, this policy option corresponds to the brand or the image of the company as it projects as an employer. Now, the shared choice policy begin with the traditional alternatives. The alternatives of lead, meet, or lag. Okay, so an employer adds a second part, which is to offer employees choices within the limits in the pay mixes. Employees have more say in the form of pay that they have to receive. This option is known as the employee as customer perspective. More advanced software is making this approach more feasible. Now, one risk, however, of this shared choice is that the employees may make the wrong choices that could jeopardize their financial well-being. And another issue is that 24 jars of jam dilemma, no? We call it the 24 jars of jam dilemma, meaning that offering employees too many choices could lead to confusion, could lead to mistakes, and could lead to even dissatisfaction. Okay? So there. Um, okay, so volatility of the stock of value change the total pay mixes, no? Volatility of stock value change, total pay mix. So another approach involves the use of a dashboard. This approach changes the focus from emphasizing the relative importance of each pay form within a single company to comparing each form by itself to the market. For example, many companies are doing it. Now, the dashboard total pay mix breakdown versus competitors. Okay, like pay levels, the mix of pay options employees receive often differs at different levels in an internal job structure. While the percentages of mix vary among organizations, greater emphasis of performance through incentives and stocks at higher level is common practice rather. And this is based on the belief that job at higher levels in the organization may have greater opportunity to influence organizational performance. Yeah, so like Mary Lynch actually has pay mixes varieties and within the structure. That's Mary Lynch. Now, we may ask, what are the consequences of pay level and mixed decisions? That is based on the guidance of your research process. Now, the external competitiveness policy directly influences the operating of expenses and the employee attitudes and work behavior. Okay? Now, some consequences of pay level. So, what are these? The efficiency. Since compensation is an expense, any decision that affect its level and mix are important. And no research suggests that under what circumstances managers should choose which pay mix alternative is better than the others. Now, within a policy achieves competitive advantage, or which of them actually, which policy achieves a competitive advantage? So research on the effect of pay level policies is difficult. Why? Because companies companies' stated policies often do not correspond to what is happening in reality, in practice. Okay? And then beyond the opinions, there is minimal evidences of the consequences of different policy alternatives. Why? Because while it is known that pay level affects cost, it is unclear whether any effects it might have on the productivity or attracting and retaining employees are sufficient to offset the cost. And another one is it is also unknown how much of a pay level variation makes a difference to employees, different level of satisfactions. Now, it may be an employer's pay level will not gain any competitive advantage. However, uh, the wrong pay level may put an employer at serious disadvantage. It is also unknown that the effects of different pay mix alternatives or the financial resource of shifting the responsibility for choosing the mix to employees. In the absence of satisfactory evidences, the least risk approach may be to set both pay level and pay mix to match competition. It is an obvious concern with flexible policies. Policies to achieve some degree of business assignment or alignment rather, and fair treatment for the employees among the choices provided. Now we talk about fairness. So when you say fairness, it's a satisfaction with pay is directly related to the pay level uh, and more better. Okay. Now, however, employees may sense of fairness is also related to how others are being paid accordingly and perception of equity. And even if the decision is made to invest in improving people's feelings about fairness of their pay, there is a little validation from research that tells us that it will improve employee overall feeling about fair treatment in the workplace. Okay? So, we have efficiency, we have fairness, we have compliance, and now, there, no? So, compliance. Now, so when you say compliance, it is a pay decision. A decision that must comply with all the relevant laws and legislations. And the laws and the regulations that will affect both the pay level and the various types of pay forms. For example, pensions and health care. And no matter the competitive pay policy, it needs to be translated into practice. Now, the starting point is measuring the market through the use of a salary survey, which will be part of the discussion in the following chapter, which is chapter 8. So, okay, so we have already articulated the content and the context of what chapter 7 will tell us, the defining the competitiveness. Okay, so thank you very much and see you in the next chapter discussion.